You're getting robbed. You just don't know it.
Yeah, Brian, I'm excited about this show because we're going to let people know about something they may not recognize. Because one thing that always kind of like gets in my craw is I don't like what I call sneaky economics. When things are happening in sort of a deceptive way to take advantage of me and, more importantly, take advantage of my wallet.
Yeah, this show, I always like to give you guys kind of the origin of where ideas come from. Bo came in, this is probably about a week and a half ago, and he goes, Brian, one of our favorite things is about to get just completely turned upside down.
Yep.
And that is, look, and my wife hates this, but there has been a period where for back pre-pandemic, during lunch hours, we would go to Costco food court to get either the $1.50 meal deal, with the foot-long hot dog, the drink, or the pizza. I know this stuff's not healthy, so we don't need the health guidance.
We didn't do it often, but if we ran out of paper towels at the office, we would make sure we ran to Costco to go refuel.
And Costco around here, if you come on the weekends, it's bedlam. I mean, there are people just everywhere. I mean, the parking lot's a disaster. And a lot of it's driven by products like a $4.99 rotisserie chicken.
Yep.
Well, you brought in that there was a friend of yours that let you know Costco is under tremendous pressure to start raising their prices on some of these staples of financial mutants everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. The article said Costco, it says that executives said they're now paying 20% more for beef and 10% more on clothing. And so because of that, likely as their cost of inputs have increased, they're likely going to have to pass that on to consumers. So it's kind of sad to think about the $4.99 rotisserie chicken no longer being $4.99, or what would be more devastating to us is the $1.50 hot dog being more than $1.50.
So I give Costco credit is that they actually are straight up telling their customers, we're going to have to raise prices on you. And all this, by the way, if you're wondering what is causing all this, inflation is here. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, we have a slide here of what's happened over the last 5 years with CPI. And by the way, let me go ahead and give you guys just a little behind the curtain look at government, central bankers, CPI. CPI is one of those measurements. Yes, the government looks at that to see how much the cost of goods are going up. But what a lot of people don't realize is that this indicator the government has the central bankers have their thumb on it to a degree, because they changed the way this was calculated in the 90s to where now, if there's a suitable substitute to an item that has increased dramatically in price, they just switch over to the lower cost. So what that does is it effectively allows inflation to occur without you realizing.
Without having to actually
for instance, if we're all eating steak and steak all of a sudden doubles in price, the CPI has the option to drop down to hamburger. It's cheaper. It's a substitute, so they will do that. So I'm just telling you, be careful when you look at how the government indicators use on these things, because they are manipulating them. But look how, if they're manipulating and it's still shooting up like this, it shows you we are living in an inflationary period right now, and you need to be on guard for some of the shenanigans that will take place by your retailers. Because realize your retailer, or where you buy your goods or services, they don't want to raise prices on you.
Because most consumers, there's some price elasticity. They don't lose their customer. They don't lose their products. They want to make sure you're still buying it. And one of the quickest way we all know to lose customers is to raise prices. So that's always sort of the last ditch effort that producers want to do.
So when you get inflationary periods, it's very common. One of the first things you'll see is not always price increases. You'll see restructuring of the packages or restructuring of the menu if you're eating food items. And I want to give you, before we jump into the packaging, I want to talk about how this is happening even on food items.
Yep.
I take the kids to Chick-fil-A on the weekends. We use the mobile app, so it records all of our previous purchases. And I noticed, I have a favorite breakfast order. So this thing's super efficient. I know what each of the kids are getting. I know what I'm getting.
You have to put it in. You just
hit
button
reorder. Well, it tells you this was probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. When I went to go hit reorder, it said, 3 of the items were no longer available on the menu. And I'm like, these are staples. What
how
do
did
they
you
mean?
get rid of these items?
How's a kid's meal not on the menu anymore? So I go a little deeper, and here's what I recognize. Like at Chick-fil-A, you used to could get a six nugget kids meal.
Yeah, I think they had them in 2 varieties, 4 or 6, right?
Now they just have 5.
Okay.
And the price, look, it's not the full 6 nugget price, but it's higher.
It's higher.
I mean, it is definitely going towards the higher side. I always get an iced coffee in the morning.
Yep.
I get a large iced coffee. Guess what? Large iced coffee gone. Now there's just one size of iced coffee. It used to give you small, large. The price is closer to the large, but I'm just telling you, this is a way you can see it where they are lowering the quantity you receive but keeping the price on the higher side. They're squeezing probably so they don't have to immediately push prices up on everything. They're just taking down the quantity. Well, you see this with your retail products as well. They'll just get very creative with the packaging.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This article that came out in the Washington Post is one way companies are concealing higher prices. It actually doesn't make the price of the goods higher, is they are adjusting the sizes of the packaging. And the article kind of walked through a number of different illustrations. One of the ones that it mentioned was Walmart's Great Value paper towels went from 168 sheets per roll to 120 sheets per roll, and they did not change the price. So you're paying the exact same amount for, I think the math was like 33% less of the product, which in essence is a price increase on that product.
Yeah, and we had Daniel, we tasked him, we said, hey, Daniel, this is going on in all kind of other things, because you see this with cereals, you see it with shaving cream. I mean, we found examples with, I'm trying to think if it was ice cream.
Yep, there was a Barbasol shaving cream. You can see that they're changing the size of the packaging. Tillamook. I'm not familiar with
fancy ice cream. If I'm eating ice cream, we're buying, you say the fancy stuff when you're eating out, the stuff in the house. We do something like Mayfield or something.
Yeah, love it. So Tillamook ice cream is decreasing. And then even things like aluminum foil, and this is kind of the same paper towel thing. You used to could buy it 120 square foot roll. Now, same size box, but they're only doing 100 square foot roll. So you're paying more per unit of product that you're buying.
So I challenge you guys, let us know as a kind of just sharing with all the other financial mutants out there. If you're noticing this also when you're out there buying goods or going to restaurants, if you see somebody do a sleight of hand where they're charging higher or or what they were charging but giving you less quantity, let us know down below in the comments, because this is something that I think would be very valuable for us all to kind of be aware of. And remember, because we're about to start answering some questions, but inflation is here, but that does not mean you need to panic about your personal finances, because, look, we talk about one of the greatest inflation hedges is owning stuff.
That's right.
I mean, that's whether you're talking about real estate, whether you're talking about a diverse investment portfolio, because it's just like what the Costco shared in the Washington Post article. They always have the ability to just raise prices. So in the short term, yes, there's going to be volatility of prices of stocks and other things. But over the long term, things settle in because companies just raise their prices. They keep the profit intact. And that's something you can be the beneficiary of in the long term. But you do need to be aware of this as a customer of the game that's going on, where you could potentially be robbed without realizing it, just because they are scared to tell you, the customer, hey, we're raising prices and giving you less for the same, just because we don't want to initially raise inflationary pricing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we all naturally do as a consumer, at least you ought to think about, is if you notice different brands starting to do this, you may want to rethink your brand loyalty. One of the things in the articles talked about how concave a specific soap brand was becoming, and they weren't making the packaging smaller, but they were making the bar of soap more curved so that it was less volume of that. And I think when Daniel heard that, he was like, man, that makes me mad. It makes me so mad that they're doing that. So pay attention to how companies are changing, and make sure that you are getting a good value for the things that you are buying when you do go to the supermarket or grocery store, buy a bag of chips, because I think that's the most frustrating.
By the way, that's a great kind of, if you guys haven't signed up for FYI by FTE, Daniel is, Daniel's been writes for us, and it was funny doing the content meetings, and the fact that he was talking about how the calculation of CPI annoyed him, and then finding out that the bar of soap that he uses, he's also falling prey to. It's getting smaller, and they do it just by shaping the bar differently.
He noticed it, but he didn't think about it. He's like, no, it is. Now it's like
Well, they
know,
probably,
there's
I'm
a
sure
half
it was
circle.
marketed as, hey, you can get to some of those hard to reach places easier because of this new innovative angle we're putting on our soap. No, it's just because they're trimming out, a few ounces of the soap bar.
Well, you guys know one of the things we love to do on these Tuesdays is we want to make sure that we're answering your questions. The reason that we do this show is so that we can help you learn and apply and grow your finances. So we want to make sure we're speaking to the things that you care about, that you're curious about. So if you have a question, make sure you get them in the chat right now. We have a team on the periphery right now getting the chat in front of me, and we are going to try to load you guys up. So Brian, this first question is from Christian. And Christian said, how is an UTMA taxed? And for those of you that don't know, UTMA is a custodial account that you can set up for the benefit of children. And Christian said, from what I've read through, a certain amount is not taxed, but once that threshold is crossed, the custodian has to include it on their return. Can you guys speak to this? So you're a resident tax expert. I'm assuming you've seen this plenty of times over the years. How are custodial accounts or kids' accounts taxed?
By the way, I love people setting up custodial accounts as part of step 8 of the financial order of operations, prepaid expenses, because it is one of those awesome things. If you've taken care of yourself, if you can start saving at a young age for children, or encourage them, maybe do a matching for the children once they start doing things, you can really show them the value of your army of dollar bills. Before I get into the actual taxation, I want to talk about the fact that you also need to be careful of what you put into your UGMA accounts. Is that I'm a big proponent of index funds, and you can do targeted, index target retirement funds. They will be indexed, and what I like index funds is because they don't distribute out as much income because they're not doing as much trading or turnover that could be capital gain generating. So that's my first tip, is to consider buying something that's very tax efficient, and index funds or targeted index retirement funds will fit that bill for your youngster that you're opening the account for. Now, this all on the taxation of this is all changed as part of the 2018 tax law. And this is pretty interesting, is that it's 18. We know that the children, you become majority age and around 18 years of age. Well, if your child is a full-time student, that 18 actually gets expanded to age 24. A lot of people don't realize that. But here's the other part of this rule that's interesting. The first $1,100 of unearned income, meaning that it's from investment or passive,
dividends, interest,
other things
gains,
like
that.
that. First $1,100 is going to be completely tax-free. Now, and by the way, since these index investments are going to not generate a ton of income, you can have a pretty large account size that will not generate $1,100. I can tell you, my own daughters, they're in the $40,000 range, did not cross $1,100 of income. And that's what I'm telling you. So you can get a lot without generating a lot of income. Once you cross $1,100, the next $1,100, so from $1,100 to $2,200, it's just going to be taxed at 10% at the child's. You will have to file. You could either file it on your tax return or file a separate tax return. And then anything over $2,200 will be taxed at the parent's tax rate.
So one of the things we always try to remind our clients is that we never want to let the tax tail wag the investment dog. So yeah, there are some thoughts that go into whether you want to do an UTMA account and how that'll affect taxability. But if you're trying to save for a specific goal and you want to help your child save for a down payment or a wedding or fill in the blank, an UTMA is a great way to do that. And if the account grows and it becomes large enough that there is a taxable issue there, that's probably a good thing. Now, if you're like day trading in it and you're generating a bunch of gains for no real reason, or you're holding really inefficient investments, maybe rethink that. But by and large, if the account's big enough that it's triggering some taxability, it's probably a pretty good thing for the benefit of the child. It means it's gotten to a critical mass that it actually is turning into a small army of dollar bills.
I think this is a powerful tool for especially people who are before working age.
Yep.
I mean, because we've done the shows where we've talked to you guys that it's so cheap to become a millionaire if you start saving as you're born. So if you're just doing a habit of $25 a month, $100 a month for the kiddos, or this is a great learning opportunity if they don't have earned income, but maybe they got a gift from relatives around the holidays, you could do matching contribution with a custodial account. You can't do the Roth accounts. I talk about the power of the tax-free growth of Roth, but remember, Roth accounts, even custodial Roth accounts, require earned income, meaning you have to do some type of labor, run a business, babysitting, cutting grass,
File a
doing
tax
something.
return.
You got to file a tax return. This is an easy way to prevent you from having to do all that stuff, but still start the behavior of building an army of dollar bills.
Chris, that was a great question, and good for you for saving for the future and being late in the late steps of the financial order of operations. This next question is, wasabi is spicy, and I think this is a question a lot of people have right now. Why are you laughing at that?
Well,
it's a funny name.
I cleaned out my nasal passages just reading the name.
Just
You reading the name
yep.
out loud to me.
Wasabi said, we sold several assets for cash, and now we have too much money in checking accounts. I don't know why they did that, but we have too much money. Where should we put the money to keep it liquid in case of emergencies, but still make the money work for us? I think what Wasabi is saying is, hey, I've got cash, I've got an emergency fund. How should I think about holding that? Where's the best place to hold cash? Is there some magic bullet that's going to make me really excited and start watching that army of dollar bills start cranking?
Yeah, cash holdings, these are things that you think you will need the money in a short time period. 12 months, is like super, you'd better have that easy access at any point in time. Less than 5 years, you don't need to have that in volatile investment marketplace items. Even as simple as something as bonds is somewhat scary in less than 5 years. So this is not going to be sexy, but it's just the reality. Online savings accounts fit the need for that. The reason we didn't say your local brick and mortar is because typically they're not paying you interest. They're paying, if they are, they're paying you, Bo, you just checked on our local brick and mortar here, and it was 0.03%.
0.03%, which is pretty disheartening.
At least if you go look at the Allies, ally.com, and and some of the others that are the leaders in the online marketplace, they're around 0.5% right now. Now, look, a year and a half, 2 years ago, they got up to 2.5%. And then you actually felt like your cash was doing something. But right now, you have to settle in that about 0.5% is about as good as you're going to get on online savings. One word I want you to do an experience share, Bo. Why do you want to choose, and you can go to bankrate.com to go pull the rates, but why do you want to choose a good brand to affiliate with versus just the highest rate?
Yeah, this happened to me a number of years ago. You guys may not know this. Brian and I stay in pretty steep competition with one another all the time about all things. And he had told me, this was a decade or so ago, that he had a really great high-yielding account that was paying X%. And I was like, okay, great, I'm going to go one-up him. So I went to bankrate.com, and I searched, and I found the highest-yielding account, and it was, 0.25%, 0.5% higher than what yours was paying. So I immediately opened an account there, and I moved all of my emergency fund in there, and then I tried to lord that over him every day that I came to the office, how much more my cash was earning. Well, I was probably not in that account for 30 days, 60 days, and then I got a letter in the mail saying, hey, just want to let you know we're adjusting your rate. And they adjusted it down. And then, 6 and 90 days later, it got adjusted down again, and then down again, and then down again. And before long, I want to say that your high yield was at least 100 basis points higher than mine at the time. And what they had done is they had bait and switched me. They had got me in this teaser rate where I came in and I moved all my money over, which is a pretty arduous process anyway. You got to open new accounts and you got to transfer it. And so it becomes pretty sticky. And then they just kept dropping my rate and dropping my rate. And before long, I was no better in the high yield I moved to than the savings account that I had moved away from.
That's exactly
and
right.
it was because it was not a reputable company. It was kind of a brand new. It was still fully FDIC insured and all the boxes were checked, but it wasn't one that is perennially in the top tier of high yield payers. And I learned my lesson. I learned my lesson not to chase that. And here's what I think, emergency reserves, cash is there for a very specific reason. And that reason often is not to grow and earn interest. Now, it's great if you can, but right now interest rates are just kind of in the doldrums. You said it, Brian. As recently as 2 years ago, you could get like 2.5% on your cash, which sounds amazing right now. And those times will come back. Don't let yourself suffer from recency bias, and just because rates are low, you start thinking, oh, well, I don't need to hold cash, or I need to do something else with it. That cash is not supposed to be the growth part of your portfolio. Your equities, your invested assets, your long-term assets are supposed to be the growth part. Let your cash do what your cash does, and if the best the market will give you right now is 0.5% or 0.6%, that's okay.
Yeah, and I think it keeps you. I want to give you the experience share that from, I can't remember, it's somewhere probably around 2010, but somewhere between 2008 2011. I shared with you guys the collapse of home equity lines, and that used to be the way I would, tell everybody how I had plenty of cash. I had access to six figures of cash because I had all this home equity. Well, I learned when in the market downturn of 2008, 9, 10, 11 for real estate, that home equity lines are, even, it doesn't matter if they give you a debit card, it doesn't matter if they give you a checkbook, they can write you a letter any point in time saying, nope, just kidding, you don't have access to that anymore because we don't think you really do have that equity. We've reevaluated the value of your real estate, and it can go away. And you never want to get caught that naked where you're not able to have liquidity for the emergencies. And I want to go the other side of cash, though, because I know cash, especially when interest rates are so low, everybody hates it. They tell cash is trash. But I do think once you make it through all 9 steps of the financial order of operations, there's actually some value to having a healthy cash reserves from market opportunities, meaning that when it can be your powder money for not only for cash reserves, but it also can be when everybody else is panicking, you will have tremendous supply of something that is a very valuable resource at that point, because cash is oxygen in a market downturn, and everybody thinks they take oxygen for granted until all of a sudden you're underwater, and then you realize, oh my goodness, I need oxygen to breathe. That's what cash does for you. If you can have enough of it, you have your surplus tank. And then everybody, ask Warren Buffett, everybody needs oxygen when markets are down, and that's what cash is going to be, that infusion. So don't let it be something that depresses you, that you're not making any money, because not only is it going to keep you safe, but it also might create a tremendous opportunity for you if you do this right.
Love it. This next question is from Nathan. Nathan said, and I love this one because I actually had one of our associates here come and ask me a similar question recently. Nathan said, should a 35-year-old put more money into an ESPP, an employee stock purchase plan, and in parentheses it says 85% cost-free money, or the Roth 401k, parentheses, free taxes? I do both now, just wondering which one I should increase first. So should I increase my ESPP because I get a discount and I can get a 15%, I can buy it for 50% cheaper, or should I just increase my Roth 401k contributions because one day I won't pay taxes on that, so it'll be tax-free growth?
Now, this one's interesting, Bo, and I'll be curious to get your take too, but I'll talk about it first. And I feel like, but this is how powerful I think the financial order of operations, because it comes up with every question we ask. I consider the 15% discount that your employer is providing you, because here's how powerful these employee stock purchase plans can be. And I don't know, we don't know their specific design, but this is what I've seen. A lot of these plans do buy in at a 15% discount from the market, but you say, well, what day do they pull the market valuation for that 15%? A lot of times, it is the cheapest between either the beginning of the quarter or into the quarter. Remember, I said cheapest. So if all of a sudden this quarter, the investment, the stock of your company has gone up 10%, you can quickly see how not only do they give you a 15% discount, they give you a 15% discount on the valuation at the beginning of the quarter. This thing might be a 25% discount if you take those things in combination with each other. So it's pretty powerful. That's why we have in step 2 of the financial order of operations, employer match or free employer money. The employee stock purchase plan makes it into that category. So that's great, but there's an umbrella event that's occurring in the background that I want everybody to be aware of. When you work for a company, you have your human capital, meaning your wages, what you do with your hands, your brains, your back, tied into the same place you're now building your financial capital. That's great to a level, but there is too much of a good thing. It's the epitome of putting all your eggs in one basket. It's awesome when it works out, because I know a lot of you guys have become clients and other things. You become millionaires off of working for a technology company, a biotech company that does this. But I just want you to be aware that you really are taking on tremendous risk with that. And that's why we do try to explain to people, try to keep your human and financial capital to where the financial capital with your employer is really not greater than 5 to 10%. And if you're wondering why 5 to 10, 5 is normal, but it goes to 10 if you're getting all this free money and you just have no control other than maximizing. So once you get to those thresholds, I do want you focusing on those Roth accounts and other things that are also great long-term opportunities because they grow completely tax-free.
And one thing to look at when you're trying to figure out which one makes the most sense for you is what rules does your specific ESPP have? Some of them will let you actually buy in and then liquidate immediately. And you may be thinking, okay, well, that's going to be a short-term transaction. I'm going to pay ordinary income tax on the gain. Yes, that's true, but remember, there's a 15% discount, so you're only paying ordinary income tax on that gain of that 15% plus whatever the stock has done. So you're still well into the black, right? It's still an advantageous strategy. It's still free money. Some ESPP plans will make you actually hold the shares for 12 months or 18 months. So if you are someone trying to control that exposure, understand how your unique plan works and adjust your strategy accordingly. But I agree with you fully, Brian. I think ESPP falls into step number 2, free money. Just like an employer match, it's really, really hard not to take advantage of it.
And if you're in a higher tax situation, you have a high income, and you're in those higher marginal rates, it might make sense because you can hear there's a lot of different variables that go into this question. It might be time to have somebody, a co-pilot, take it pro because I do maybe it's my public accounting background. I love for the right people that are in those higher tax brackets. I like that you can essentially create your own ladder strategy where you hold them 12 months, then turn them to cash. That way you're dropping that capital gain, that tax rate down so substantially. But I can give that guidance to everyone because you might be actually loading up too much. It's very personalized, and that's why I say you might need a financial advisor to help you because that's not the type of guidance you can give to everyone.
This next question is a little bit of tax planning as well. This is from Caleb. Caleb says, what is an after-tax 401k, and how is it different from a Roth 401k? So most folks know that when you go to make your 401k elections, you generally have 2 options. You can do a pre-tax 401k contribution where your money will go in and you'll get a tax deduction this year. It'll grow tax deferred, and then when you go to pull the money out in retirement, you'll pay ordinary income tax on that. Or you could do what's called a Roth 401k contribution, where you put your money in, you don't get a current year tax deduction, it will still grow tax deferred, and then assuming that certain qualifications are met, when you go to pull that money out, it's actually tax free. So that's the difference in Roth and pre-tax. Well, for some plans, they actually have a third option, and that option is called an after-tax 401k contribution. The way that works is you put money in after tax similar to the Roth. But what's unique is when the money grows, it doesn't grow tax-free. It actually grows tax-deferred just like your pre-tax money. So you could put money in after tax and it'll grow tax-deferred. And then when you go to pull it out, you won't pay any taxes on the contributions you put in, but you will pay taxes on the earnings on those contributions when you pull it out. So the immediate question that most people have is, okay, well, why on earth would I ever do after tax? Why would that be something advantageous? Well, most folks know that the salary deferral limits, at least this year, for those under 50 is $19,500, or if you're over 50, it's $26,000. Well, a lot of people don't realize when it comes to after-tax contributions, you can actually go above those $19,500 and above those $26,000 limits. You can take it all the way up to the full, I want to say it's $58,000 this year.
$58,000.
All the way up to $58,000. So you can do $19,500 into either pre-tax or Roth, and then you can do the remainder of the contribution into your after-tax. So it really allows you to hypercharge your savings, but there's even a little bit more. It even gets a little bit more exciting than just that.
Yeah, here's the cool thing about those after-tax savings. It depends upon how your plan is designed and written. Some will allow you to do what's called distribution or conversions within the plan, and some you have to do what's called in-service distributions, where you roll it out to essentially convert it to a Roth IRA outside of the 401k. But the big thing that Bo's alluding to is that you have the ability with after-tax to convert those balances completely tax-free into Roth accounts. That's why we call these mega backdoor Roth conversions. And it's a tremendous opportunity. There are some caveats you need to be careful of, though. First of all, that $58,000 we told you was the cap That's all sources. We're talking about your contribution, your salary deferral. We're talking about your employer's match as well as your employer's profit sharing. What you want to be careful of when you do after-tax contributions, because you're taking advantage of the mega Roth, is that you don't want to squeeze out your employer's money. Meaning you put in your contribution, you don't leave any room, in that $58,000 for your employer, because the employer is going to be tickled to death. They just be like, "Great, I'm so glad you hit $58,000. We're just going to keep our free money this year." So that's why you better measure twice, cut once, to really know what your employer is going to put in the plan, so you can plan accordingly, so you don't miss out on that free money.
Again, this is going to sound a little bit like a broken record, but if you're someone who is considering taking advantage of the after-tax 401k and potentially utilizing some sort of mega Roth conversion strategy, it's pretty nuanced, and it might be a good time, if you are at that level of complexity, to think about reaching out to a professional to help you make sure that you are crossing all of your T's and dotting all of your I's, because you want to make sure that you do it right. And there are even some unique things. If you're someone who wants to do the mega backdoor, but then you're also doing normal backdoor Roth conversions, there are some intricacies you have to do as it relates to the earnings. It's just pretty nuanced. So make sure you understand what you're doing before you move to an advanced strategy. But if you are someone who has a plan that allows that, it's a really, really exciting opportunity. All right, this next question is from Jay. This is also a retirement plan question. I feel like that's a theme right now. Hey, guys, can you talk about 457 plans? I max out my 401k and 457. Is that better than saving elsewhere? So let's talk a little about what makes 457 plans so unique and so exciting when we see them for clients.
Yeah, I love, so the individual that asked this question either works for probably a university, a hospital, something like that, because it's so interesting when you're dealing with 401ks and 403bs. Those are all, the contributions are written under the same code section of the IRS tax code, which is section 4, the 415 limits. And so it doesn't matter if you have 3 jobs and each of them offer you a 401k, you'd be a very busy person, but you'd only be able to put in the $19,500. And you could put 5 at one, 4,500 at another, and 10 at the next. But at the end of the day, they're all capped at $19,500. And this is a problem sometimes people have when they change jobs, is that if they maxed out their employer at the first job and then go to the next job doesn't know that they've already maxed out their 401k, and they'll over contribute.
Which is a problem.
Well, that's a problem. So that's all 401k, 403bs, 19.5. Doesn't matter how many jobs, you're one person, you get 19.5. There's an asterisk that ought to be in the code, and the fact that 457s is a completely different code section, and that 19.5 or whatever's allowed to be contributed, depending upon how your plan is structured, is completely separate. So you can actually max out your 401k, and then if your employer offers not only 401ks or 403bs, but also a 457, you can do both, which is really incredible. This is why you see this often with doctors, especially who work at hospitals and other things like that, where they can do both contributions. And here's another cool thing about 457s for government employees, because I see this because a lot of governments will have 457s plus a 401k, is 457s don't have that 59.5 or even the 55, because 401ks, if you've left separated from service, you can still, while it's at a 401k, pull money out post 55. 457s don't have that. And that's why you'll see a lot of times police officers, firefighters, and other things, because they retire so much sooner than the traditional employee, that you will see, typically they have a 457 because there's no prepayment. There's no penalties for pulling that money out before 59.5 or 55.
So what I would recommend is, if you are thinking about, you do have 401k and 457, go to the website, go to moneyguide.com/resources, and download the free deliverable, the financial order of operations, and make sure you're working through those steps, right? So if you're trying to figure out, how do I think about doing the 401k and doing the 457, that's going to be somewhere around step 6, step 7, where I'm maxing out my employer retirement plans. You just have the ability to max out a lot differently than other folks who only have access to the one plan and can only do the 119.5.
The only caveat that I'd put, and I'm glad you gave the indicator on step 7 of financial order of operations, is that I want you to think about those 3 buckets strategy, because we do have a problem. We did a show, if you'll go check out, it's where you're retirement rich. I mean, because that happens where we see people come to us that are great savers, but they have no liquidity because they didn't build up the 3 baskets. They have all their money and only retirement money. And then so they get in their late 40s, early 50s, and they're worth multiple 7 figures, but they can't even afford to go buy a car with cash because they can't get access to any of their money. So that's why we have step 7, which is hyperaccumulation. I'm not going to cover it on this Q&A show, but we have done shows on that of something you need to be aware of.
This next question is one that I actually get a lot from friends, and I guess my friends are kind of at the stage of life where they're thinking about these sorts of things. But this one is from Luke, and Luke says, how often do you recommend rebalancing your brokerage accounts? And I got some thoughts on that. You know, it seems like a couple years ago, these algorithmic systems really became popular. We could have a robo-advisor that was doing like daily rebalancing or like monthly rebalancing. And that sounds great, right? Like you're thinking about, I'm always on target. I'm always exactly where I want to be until it comes time to do your tax return. And then you're like, holy cow, all those transactions that happen now have to be reported if it was inside a brokerage account. We are of the opinion, and we've kind of adopted the philosophy that we are constantly looking at and reviewing portfolios, but that doesn't mean that we're constantly changing, because every decision you make to rebalance is really a twofold decision. I'm making the decision to sell something and to buy something else, and you have to make sure that you like both sides of that equation. A real easy example is, let's say that you have a portfolio in place and we're coming out of the COVID downturn, and one asset class, let's say like a U.S. large cap, performs better than other asset classes. What's going to naturally happen is it's going to outperform, and so it's probably going to become slightly overweighted in your portfolio. Well, you have to make the decision, has something else in the portfolio also decreased in value to the extent that I want to sell the thing that's doing well and I want to buy another thing? Well, if that other thing hasn't done poorly, or perhaps that other thing has done well, or perhaps the other thing is not more well valued than the thing you're thinking about selling, it may not make sense to rebalance. So we take a pretty liberal view on rebalancing, where we like to target looking at it, a couple times a year. But just because we're looking at it and reviewing it doesn't mean that we're placing trades. We're not trying to strictly adhere to a finite, this has to be exactly 19.4% in this asset class. I think if you're trying to do that, you're going to end up creating more stress and more motion and more movement than you're actually going to improve your financial circumstance.
So I completely agree. If you look at it a few times a year, doesn't mean you're necessarily moving to action. And the other thing I would say is just pay attention to macro events. That's the other thing that we have. We're not market timers, but we are definitely aware of changing economic systems. I mean, it was probably, I want to say 5 years ago, we quit using natural resources as an alternative sleeve and commodities and things like that, because we were just worried about the long term. What's the future? I mean, because there's so many things that were changing that we just didn't feel like that sleeve of investments offered a lot of value anymore. Plus the volatility, the risk reward was all over the place. So macro events can also drive rebalancing. So be aware of that. We've seen that with real estate in the past. We've seen that with when the government changes their quantitative easing or how much they're printing and resources, these are all things to be aware of. So look at your asset allocation a few times a year, but also pay attention to what's going on around you so that you can make sure your portfolio is forward-looking, still very much indexed and structured in a way that you're not having to day trade and do things, but also make sure you're keeping track of what's going on in this crazy world that we live in. And that's one of those things where I tell people, when you reach economic success, where you're the CEO of a portfolio that's 7 figures, you're going to start worrying, what's the risk I'm screwing something up because I just don't know what I don't know. And that's why we always say, complexity is going to come to you. You can keep your life as simple as possible, and that's where the abundance cycle comes in. We know you'll graduate the relationship to the next level.
One thing that we talk about as an investment committee here, and I think we got this from Warren Buffett. Warren, if you're out there listening and you didn't say this, I apologize for giving you credit for it.
If it wasn't Warren, it was Mark Twain.
It was either Warren, Mark Twain, or Michael
or
Scott.
Benjamin Franklin.
Or Benjamin Franklin, one of those. And this is what he said. He says, when it comes to like the investing decisions we make, we care more about the quality of our decisions than the quantity of them. And I think when it comes to rebalancing, you ought to approach it that way. Is the trade that I'm placing, is the adjustment I'm making a quality thing, or is it just a quantity, it's just another thing to create motion in the portfolio? And I think what he actually said is we get paid based on the quality of our decisions, not the quantity of our decisions.
That is a Warren. That's for sure.
Is that Warren? I thought that's what he
said. That is for sure a Warren.
But if Mark Twain might have said it too. Here's a question. This is from Two Sides of FI. Is long-term care insurance worth considering? At what age should early retirees begin thinking about it? And I feel like that's one that we get a lot. How should I think about long-term care insurance? What is long-term care insurance? When does long-term care insurance make sense, or does it even make sense?
Well, this is a hard one because that marketplace has changed so much. I mean, guys, realize these products came out and they were too good to be true.
Yep.
And we are seeing the after effects of that, is that these plans were a few $1,000s a year, and some were just for a few years, some were for the rest of your life, and they just had automatic cost of living adjustments for inflation. But everybody always disregards a key element of most insurance contracts. There's usually an asterisk somewhere on there that says, hey, this is what we're setting the structure up, but if we ever find out that we really messed this thing up, we overestimated here, or we didn't get what we thought here, we can always go to the state insurance commission and adjust rates on our policyholders.
So long as we do it for everybody,
as long as you do it to everybody. Nobody pays attention to that. So we've seen some unique things where I have clients who bought, they bought these policies before they were clients of ours, because we would have told them that this was something we were concerned about, where they have 30-40% premium increases
in a year.
By the way, and it's not just one time and you're set for life after that. They go ahead and give you the heads up that they plan on asking the state insurance commissioners these adjustments every year for the foreseeable future. And I've even seen where they're trying to convince you, hey, take this much lower product and we'll try to quit hitting you up on these premium increases. So these traditional products have kind of changed dramatically. And now you see these more hybrid approaches where they're doing life insurance and strapping on riders for the long-term care. It's kind of a hybrid approach. I'll get back just telling you to be aware that this is because the graying of America is a legit thing. There's a lot of the population that will be retiring. The insurance industry is trying to capture that, but they don't quite have it figured out. And you guys will not be completely protected. And now under these new hybrid products, I've been told, yes, you will be protected, but they're much, much more expensive.
That's right.
We've always thought that a good time to look is sometime in your 50s, because that is one of those things where you're starting to firm up the retirement plan. You know what your health structure looks like. You're still fit enough at that age that underwriting might not be as big of an issue. I've been impressed. I'll just give an experience share because I just had this conversation just last week with my mom and her husband. Is that we did years ago for all CPAs. One of the great things about being a CPA is that we don't take risk, I guess.
All right, yeah.
It's not like you see a lot of CPAs that want to go jump out of airplanes.
Nope.
So I guess we get great underwriting, and it's known that CPAs have access to great life insurance, great disability coverage. Well, fortunately, that stuff extends to our loved ones, relatives. I don't know how our behavior, maybe they assume if you're a CPA that, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree.
The same way.
So I was talking to my mom because we bought a long-term care through the AI CPA insurance program, and they were doing a premium increase, but it was minimal. I was very impressed. I don't know if we don't normally talk about products, but I had that experience share that. So if all my CPAs out there I've been very impressed with how the insurance affiliate that the AI CPA is working with has done really good to try to not squeeze their participants like you've seen in other insurers do.
Yeah, I think for the times that we've looked at long-term care insurance and tried to help clients, that is one of those unique things in the financial world that I am of the opinion is more of an art than a science. Because there are a few things you have to weigh. One is your genetic genealogy, right? Like what have the end of lives looked like for your parents and your aunts and your uncles? Are things that would require long-term assistance, long-term care prevalent in your family? Alzheimer's, early onset dementia, that sort of thing. Or, like in my family, most of the men, end of life, it's like a cardiac event, and it's pretty much like, that and done. So you have to kind of like think about what has your family done, and then you have to think about your personal situation. Am I at the point where my asset base is low enough that if I'm having to pay for a long-term care premium as part of my retirement expenses, it's going to be cost inhibitive for the remainder of my life? It might not make sense. Or perhaps if my asset base is large enough, I'm self-insured against that, because when you look at statistically how long people that actually access long-term care policies use them on average, perhaps you have a large enough asset base to self-insure against that risk rather than bearing that premium cost. It's a very unique, individualized decision, and I would say that I've never seen any two circumstances that were exactly the same in terms of yes, this does make sense, or no, this does make sense, because there's so many different factors and variables that go into the conversation.
Well, what's interesting to me is we have long-term care, which is a product that's out there we're all worried about the cost of end of life. There's also, in addition to the insurance products, there's also, Eric Hell and I worked on one of these cases where there are now communities. I know these exist in Florida, to where you are buying into a community that starts as assisted, or you're just a retirement community, but then you do a lump sum of your investment portfolio plus some ongoing support costs, but it is the equivalent of long-term care, and it takes you from retirement all the way through hospice and other things, and it's kind of the way they structured these things. It reminds me of a long-term care policy. So I'm just telling you, the industry is very creative, and that's why you just need to be very proactive in planning for these things, guys. Just know, make sure you have somebody to help you measure all the different ways that you can navigate this, and you do it well. So I think that's a solid thing. And a lot of times it comes up to what brings you peace of mind and comfort. Because when I show clients, because we don't sell insurance, but if people tell us that they have concerns, we scratch that itch for them. And at the end of the day, you usually say, is this something that gives you peace of mind? Because I don't think it blows up or costs you your financial retirement, but you have to figure out, only you can make the decision, because it's more of an emotional type purchase in some aspects.
This next question is from Brooks. Brooks says, married this year, congratulations. Wife has a rollover IRA. Am I now not able to do backdoor Roths? Am I able to do something with her rollover so we can continue doing backdoor Roths? That's a great question. When you get married, you may have had your account structured in one way that allowed you to do something, then you get married, and how does that affect me? What are the impacts of that? And specifically, Brooks is asking about how it relates to a Roth conversion strategy it sounds like he was implementing.
Yeah, Brooks is asking a great question, because I get why this seems counter to common sense, in the fact that there's a lot of things you don't qualify for certain tax benefits if you try to file married filing separately. Once you file married filing jointly, that's the only way you qualify for things. So when you've experienced that, you're like, well, surely IRAs is probably the same thing. If I marry somebody and they've got an IRA rollover, it's going to screw up my Roth conversion strategy. No. Here's the cool thing about IRA accounts. They are completely separate. They're based upon your Social Security number, and if your wife has a IRA rollover but you do not, you qualify for doing the backdoor Roth conversions. She does not, because she has rollover assets. So it is aggregated by taxpayer Social Security number, not as a household, which is a very powerful planning tool.
But remember, one of the things that is a benefit once you are married filing jointly is that the Roth income limits increase. So maybe your single income puts you out of Roth eligibility, but now that you have got married and there's a larger income threshold, perhaps now you can just do straight up Roth contributions. If that's not something that's available to you, but you are in a lower tax bracket and maybe you live in a state with no state income tax, if your wife has access to a Roth 401k or Roth 403b, that might be a great way for you to build Roth assets for her if she can't do the backdoor. So there are a number of ways that you can still build those Roth assets, but it is important to know, if you are doing the conversion strategy, what things kind of go into that and what can make a tax-free Roth conversion a taxable Roth conversion. This next question is from Zachary, sorry. And this is this is involved. It's specifics, but I'm gonna ask a bigger question here. He said, I can pick a no deductible insurance plan for $74 a month, or a high deductible plan for $81 a month with a $1,400 deductible. The high deductible plan gives me access to an HSA. Should I pick the high deductible plan because of the HSA? I'm 28, no kids, and healthy. So one of the things that's really interesting is it sounds like his high deductible plan is actually more expensive than the other, which I think is different than what we normally see. But let's forget about the specifics for a second. I think here's the question that Zachary's really asking. If open enrollment comes up and I have options for a couple different health insurance plans, how do I figure out which one makes the most sense for me? Is there like a way to think through that to determine which way I should go?
Zachary's situation, because we've seen this before, these crack me up because it's almost an arbitrage situation where I almost can see how this played out in HR. Is that you have probably a very traditional company, a very successful company that has a Cadillac insurance policy, meaning that they have loaded this thing up. It's highly, highly subsidized by your employer, and that's why your premium is 70-something bucks a month. By the way, your insurance cost is way beyond that. It's just your employer is picking up the lion's share of it. But then I envision there's some financial mutants out there at the workforce that have watched enough Money Guy shows that they go, you know what, these HSAs, they made it on the financial order of operations. I know that if I use it appropriately, this is another way to get that triple tax advantage, to get the tax-free growth. My employer needs to offer this. So you go to your awesome employer and they go, well, you know, we have this Cadillac plan, but if they want it, we'll put it together. So they put together an option within their cafeteria plan that allows a high deductible health insurance, because realize you can't do a health savings account unless you have a high deductible insurance plan. So your Cadillac insurance policy that covers everything, has zero deductible, doesn't qualify for you to make those contributions. And then I'm always amazed when these successful companies put these out when the premium is actually higher to the participant than the Cadillac, because it's almost like a Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote moment where they're putting pine straw on it going, sure, here it is, you asked for it, and they're actually probably hoping that you do take it because it's going to save them a fortune on the highly subsidized insurance. But I do think it's going to require a lot more on you when these opportunities are put, because there's a good chance, I get it, you're healthy, you don't use health insurance, you're like, it's great that they're subsidizing, but I'm getting zero economic benefit out of this because I'm in my 20s. I don't use my health insurance. I don't get sick. But I don't know that I can encourage somebody to go immediately jump into the HSA, the high deductible plan, when if you did have an ask, if you needed to actually got in a car accident or something or you got struck with an illness that put you in the hospital or something, you might... there's a balance there that you've really created some weird distortions by the way your employer set up. Because the way it's traditionally supposed to happen, and this is the common sense way, when you have two options, the Cadillac versus high deductible. High deductible better be a heck of a lot cheaper because you're carrying a lot more of the risk of the policy since you have to put your own money into your health care treatments before the insurance actually kicks in. You're really basically buying access to their discount network. You should be getting cost savings on that. So to hear that the Cadillac coverage is actually cheaper turns the whole concept upside down.
Yep.
And I think that's something to be aware of. I felt like I went a long way on that. Did I cover
No,
everything,
I think
Bo?
that was great. For me, when it comes, I think I allow whenever things are uncertain, I try to like make mathematics inform the decision, and so it's pretty easy. Like I set up sort of a T column, two sides, and I figure out, okay, what's my premium difference? How do we go to the doctor? And like, so I got little kids now, and you know, we always go to the doctor for something. But when I was single, we never went to the doctor. So I might get sick and go to like for a sick visit once a year or something like that. But now that I have kids, it's different. But you estimate kind of your costs. And you say, okay, if I'm doing the copay thing on here, how much will as many visits I have in copays cost? And then over here, if I'm having to hit the deductible, how much each of those office visits cost. Is it a $20 copay versus a $200 office visit? And I kind of total up what I estimate it'll be. Well, then the very last part of the calculus I do is, okay, what's the deduction I'm going to get if I max out the HSA? And so really I add up A, premium difference, plus B, difference in costs based on my usage, plus C, tax deduction from HSA, and one of them will be better than the other. And generally speaking, when I look at those two options, I go with the one that's mathematically better, unless I know I'm going into a year where I'm going to have a specific type of surgery, or I'm going to have a baby. Not I'm going to have a baby. Never had one. My wife has done all the baby having for us. And that sort of thing, then you can make that selection. But if you don't really know, I'd let the math inform the decision.
So I feel like what we just did there, I did the qualitative discussion. You did the quantitative.
That's kind
we
of
tag teamed
that's the way it would go. Yep,
well
perfect.
done.
All right, this one is a long question, but I know a lot of people are thinking this, so I'm going to do this. And this is from Andrew, and this is actually a Facebook question. The housing market here in, I'm going to say the city, you could basically fill in the blank because it seems like every city right now, but the housing market here in Atlanta area is nuts. We've lost 3 houses because others are getting rid of contingencies, especially inspection and appraisal. We're not willing to do that or get that risky. We've offered well above asking price each time, but continue to get outbid. Should we just wait until next year to buy? At the same time, we're sitting on $300,000 of home equity in our current house with multiple kids, and we need a bigger home. I'm trying to balance capturing our equity and not getting ripped off on the purchase of the next home. What would you do? Thanks. I feel like so many people are in that situation right now, right? I've made money on this house, and I want to get to another house, but I don't want to spend that money, so the houses that I keep making offers on, you know, it goes pre-market and there's 40 offers and we're asking, and they're just moving and they're just going and they're just moving and they're just going. How do you figure that out?
I'm going to talk to, who asked this question?
This is Andrew.
Andrew, I'm going to talk to you like you're, you know, we get told all the time, we're like your buddy you sit around a campfire and have the beer with. This is the unique thing that we're dealing with right now. I do think, look, life happens. And even if you're buying at the tippity top of a market, you know, you do this long enough because you need it for the right reasons. Your family's growing. It probably all works out, but there is something really that irks me about this current market.
Yep.
Is that I have, throughout my life, the more prepared you are, the more research you do, you get rewarded.
Generally speaking.
In life. And in this real estate market right now, it is just so blows my mind that all the due diligence is just out the window.
Yep.
And the fact that they're not allowing you to do inspections, the appraisals no longer being allowed in a lot of these cases. So let me, like I said, we're at the campfire. I don't think that this is a bubble forming, meaning I don't think that housing prices are going to, if you wait, you're going to be able to pick up the house that you looked at last week for 30% cheaper because the bubble burst. I think what you're likely to see is we have a distortion in the marketplace and the fact that, yes, prices are going to go up, and eventually the supply and demand will equalize on the inventory because right now there's just no inventory. And what will happen is just price increases will slow down at that point. And I'm hoping what happens when that happens is also common sense of, hey, on such a big purchase, it might make sense that you get to do an inspection. It also might make sense that you get to get an appraisal done, and that's going to drive whether this deal moves forward. though that has to come back. This is the distortion that I see going on right now, is that all the due diligence is being waived. That is that would scare me tremendously. I would be in the same boat in this, and yes, you could capture a tremendous amount of opportunity on your current home, but I got to believe if you're buying bigger, there's still going to be a big step to go, and you don't want to go buy somebody else's huge mistake. So I can't answer specifically for Andrew, but if I was putting myself in his situation, I would probably really have to think long and hard, because I don't know that I'd be willing to waive all due diligence.
Yeah,
that just bothers me.
When things start defying common sense, that's when my spidey sense goes off. When things start like, it just doesn't add up, that doesn't pass a sniff test. And buying a major piece of real estate with no appraisal, no due diligence, no inspection, that kind of freaks me out a little bit. And I think about risk, right? If you're trying to find a home to put your family in, is your risk greater overpaying for a house that you're going to be in for 10, 12, 15? Maybe, you want to pay $400,000, but all the houses you're seeing are $475,000. I'm making up numbers here. That's a risk, but that's probably a bigger risk than buying. I mean, that's probably not as big of a risk of buying a house that might have something major wrong with it, that might have some big issue that you don't know about, or that I just think that if you stay diligent, eventually there will come a house that's going to be available. You may have to adjust your price range. You may have to adjust your location. You may have to adjust the things that you know that you want. Or if you're unwilling to waver on some of those things, then you may just have to wait. And that's okay. Another option you can look at is if you're in a house right now that you really love, but there are some things that don't work, like there's not enough space for the family. A lot of folks are beginning to think about renovating their current houses because they can't find something new at the price they want and the place they want. You may want to see, is there an option there? Are there ways that we could better utilize the space that we always have? But it's tough.
I also think here's something that, because I just learned, what I love about life is you learn stuff constantly. I had a property and casualty insurance agent talking about the fact that my house is now getting old enough that it's rolling off of the discounts that new construction counts for, because it's getting to be 6 or 7 years old. So I think that there's a reason insurance companies phase out, they differentiate between new construction versus more of a maturing houses, because a mature house, things break.
Yep.
I mean, it's just a fact about owning a house, is that you start having things go bad. So maybe you could reverse the arbitrage situation. If you live in an older house that has a lot of headaches, I mean, I'm not going to say names because they've moved on from these houses, but I've seen houses that people lived in where you find out that somebody previously on this 40-year-old home, they put in the wrong pipe size for the air conditioner. So it didn't matter how big of an air conditioner you put outside, you were always going to have trouble keeping the house cool, because somebody cheaped out at some point, and you'd have to replace all the ventilation to make it happen. You got to believe, if you live in one of those houses right now where the warts and the disgusting parts of your house, you got to be licking your chops right now, because you go, man,
this is
I
my
could
opportunity.
finally get rid of this house that has this $25,000 mistake that I can get out of this thing scot-free. And maybe you could go play the arbitrage to your benefit, get out with it while they're waiving all the due diligence, and then go buy something that's maybe a less than a 5-year-old house, and maybe your risk is not as big. So there are creative ways. And then, Bo, you also said we know people all around here who, instead of buying the bigger house, they're renovating their smaller house into a bigger house. So I would get creative, do it financial mutant style, because everybody's situation is a little different. But that's one more reason why you need to be very careful right now with waiving due diligence, is because you got to believe I'm not the first person to think about this is the time to ditch this headache.
That's right.
I mean, go watch the Tom Hanks movie Money Pit, and you'll get a big indicator on why due diligence is so important.
We actually just showed that to the content team. They had never seen it. Isn't that wild? They'd never seen that movie
before. By the way, experience share. Tom Hanks was just in The Good Cup, which is right down the street from my
at the
house.
coffee shop by your house?
Here's what I found out. Somebody in that thing you do, that movie he made years ago, the lead in that movie is supposedly lives somewhere around us.
Huh.
And Tom Hanks was in there. Everybody said he was the nicest guy. So I thought that was just an experience share that, because it made me think of Money Pit. You see how my brain works in arcs.
That part was for free. All right, this question. This is a good one, Brian, and this one, this is a good one. We'll see where this goes. This is from James. James says, "Can you do an experience share on how you budget for giving and possibly your journey as wealth grew? My wife and I feel motivated to increase our giving while remaining intentional." And I don't know if he means intentional about giving or intentional about building wealth. But how do you go about thinking about that?
Now, look, because I do want, I'll be glad to talk about this, but I would be doing wrong in the fact that one of the bigger inspirations for me is you have done this so well. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I felt like my giving charitably, I've always been charitable, but it increased later.
Sure.
You came out of the chute, like from college on, you've always been a great charitable giver. And I felt somewhat inspired by you. So I felt like it'd be wrong for me to talk about how I give without giving you the respect of you sharing first.
Yeah, for those of you, so my story is a little unique. I came from very, very humble beginnings. I grew up in, pretty extreme poverty. And so when I got, out of high school and into college and started working, I was like, man, this is awesome. Like, I felt like, you start your first job and you get that salary, you get the first paycheck. I was like, holy cow, I'm rich. I'm rich. It's so awesome. And I just remember being so...
I know what I paid you. You were not rich.
I was not rich at that point. I just remember feeling so blessed and so thankful and so just grateful for that. I said, man, I don't ever want to take it for granted. So one of the things that I made an assessment of early on, and my wife made the same assessment, and we allow our faith to dictate this, is that we wanted to be generous. No matter what stage of life we're in, no matter if we're incredibly successful or incredibly unsuccessful, we always wanted to be generous givers. And so as part of our budgetary thing, for us, that was always step one. We'd always give first, and then we would pay ourselves first, and then we would figure out spending. And that's kind of how we budgeted. And we sort of did that all through life. Well, again, as life has gone well, as we've had some success and the firm has grown, what I recognized is that while I was always doing it, I was always giving and supporting causes that we care about and donating, that sort of stuff. It kind of became, I don't know if familiar is the right word, and I feel like that's kind of, James, what you're asking about is, how do you, as you grow, as your wealth builds, how do you think about that? One of the commitments that we made is we always wanted to feel a little uncomfortable. We always want to give to a place where it feels like, it's a little bit of a stretch. It's a little bit of something, because that's something that mattered to us, because we always want to be so grateful and so happy about all the things that we have, that if we're willing to kind of hold on to it loosely and kind of, help others who have not had the same opportunity, have not been in the same place, and not been able to do the same thing, we always want to be in a place where we can do that. Now, what I love is, as opportunities present themselves, now we can think about ways to give really, really efficiently, using charitable gift funds and gifting appreciated securities. And so the way in which we give has matured just as our financial circumstances matured. And I think that's what's awesome about, even in the ways that you do the things you did 20 years ago when you started your career, you can do those same things now, but you can do them better and more efficient and to a different extent. That's kind of how we've approached it and thought about it.
I always think that giving is such an important part of success, is because I think about all the great movies out there with the villain wealthy person. Mm-hmm. I mean, because that's what society pushes out there, is the son of a gun that is, got money and then not paying it forward.
Scrooge, yeah.
The Scrooge, that we could go through. There's a lot of others. I will tell you that I think wealth is one of those things that you need to make sure you are creating structure so that you don't get caught up in your own success. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to be a generous person. And I have found from my own giving strategy that the more I have let go of capturing my essence off of what I have and more into what I can give, is, by the way, abundance is you would think it would get smaller, but somehow the success continues to grow by giving more and more and more. It's the most contrary thing, but I think it's also because your spirit, instead of turning dark towards the success and how great you are, it kind of lets you stay focused on what the why is, and that this is just a tool that you're using to create success.
That's right.
It's not the center of the universe of why you have success, which is the number sometimes I think people get caught up in. Now, I will tell you the way I do it, and this is a little different than Bo in the fact that I've tried to respect in the fact that I want to give, and I want to give a percentage of my income, but my income is all over the place,
Sure.
because we own several businesses. It's not like I can just get a salary and that comes in. So what I have done is I've created is essentially whatever my income tax return was for last year. I multiply that number for all income sources by that number, and then that's the goal I have for the coming year.
Love it.
And every month, at the end of the month, first fruits type style, I give to my charitable giving fund from my appreciated holdings, because I have a joint investment account, and then realize I've told you guys this is where it's really cool, financial mutant style. I'm buying also every month into that same investment. So over time, I'm not only fulfilling my charitable obligations or desires, but I'm also raising the basis in that account. So where if I ever needed a liquidity event or needed to get access to it, it's all working together. And the best thing that facilitates that is that charitable gift fund. I use Fidelity. They don't have a minimum on setting those accounts up anymore. Y'all corrected me last time that I think I said it was $2,500. It's actually there's no minimum.
No minimum now.
So these things are very easy to structure a giving strategy like this, and I know that this probably goes beyond because it's more of a spiritual thing. But I will tell you the saying: it is better to give than to receive. Generosity and the abundance cycle has yet to fail me in all my years of doing this, and you've been a great example. I've followed your lead, and it's been an incredible journey. And
look, one of the ways that we love to give back is we love to do this show. We love to make sure that we are answering your questions, that we are loading you guys up with, frankly, as much financial information as you can hold. This, I think, is probably the highlight of both of our weeks when we get to come in, do these shows, hang out with you guys. If you've not had a chance to go check out the website, go to moneyguide.com/resources. We have tons of resources available for you. We have a tax guide. We have the food deliverable. We have how powerful are your dollars. If you've not spent any time on our resource page, make sure you go check it out, because those are just a few of the things that we want to equip you with to be able to take your finances to the next level.
Guys, thanks so much. I'm your host, Brian Preston. Mr. Bo Hansen, Money Guy Team, out.